Okay, back again with some more Golos Tireless Pilgrim. I have made one adjustment to the deck from the last video, which is that I actually took Felwar Stone out. Basically, Felwar Stone always produces a mana. As long as Felwar Stone produces mana, it doesn't always. If they have no land or if they have all colorless land, it doesn't work. But if it produces mana, it's always going to produce a mana of a color this deck should want, in theory, since it's a 5-color deck. But that's not always the case. For example, if you have, I don't know, Tropical Island and you've got your Savannah, like you tithed and grabbed a Savannah and then you top decked a Tropical. So now you've got Tropical and Savannah and you're playing against mono green and you play Felwar and you've got another green source and you're like, I don't need all this green mana, right? And that can happen against multiple other decks. So it's an artifact that might produce blue, and which is really what we care about the most in our artifacts, when they're not massive quantities of colorless. And so I am okay with it coming out. I mean, of course, it's with Chromatic Ori. It's just as good as every other permanent. I do like it because I like the speed, and I do like the potential for mana fixing, but I don't feel that I'm going to necessarily miss it. And we've already got a signet of every color thanks to the talismans cycle being completed, plus Arcane Signet, which is a signet of all colors. So we've already got all 5 colors covered there and here and here. I think it's probably okay. Meantime, I took that out for a card that I want to try with Golos. It just seems really good for this deck, and that is the Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale. The ability to play Golos and fetch a land that potentially locks up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of your opponent's mana, depending on how fast they've been swarming, is great. In a Winter Orb deck, it sounds really good. There's also a couple other things that Tabernacle does for me, though. As I see it, Tabernacle is extremely cool with Vedalken Shackles because you can steal a creature and then not pay the upkeep. And then on the next turn, you can steal another creature and then not pay the upkeep. And over time, you can just slowly 2-card combo away most of the creatures that they can play, which is really gnarly. And then, meanwhile, Tabernacle also, if you've got the time, and it's appropriate to do so, you can Tabernacle and just let Golos go, and then replay Golos and go get more land. So you can actually it's not exactly ramp, but you can develop off of the Tabernacle using your commander, which is pretty interesting. Now the fact that you may have to pay the upkeep and then Golos, it does delay Golos's ultimate perhaps by a turn. Might be a bit of a drawback, and it could be with Urza as well. Other than those 2 scenarios, though, it's generally good. We don't really care. I suppose if you had a bunch of Duretti tokens in play, this would be bad. First of all, you wouldn't play it if you did. Secondly, if you have a bunch of Duretti tokens, you've already won the game probably, because that means you have complete board control. It means you're not killing artifacts or creatures, so they don't have either one of those things in play, at which point I assume you have pretty safely won the game. So that's a scenario that doesn't really matter. The scenario where you're 1 mana off from using Golos, well, technically you could put Tabernacle on the stack. During upkeep, you could activate Golos, and then you could let it go, I suppose, but by then you've used Golos and you probably have won the game and you're going to be replaying him, yada, yada, yada. So I don't know. I think it's okay. Paying with the Urza, or excuse me, the Urza thing. Here you can tap the artifact creature to pay for itself if you really want to, and then that just leaves Urza where you're losing 1 mana. But the potential to disrupt your opponent seems so high and so good, especially with Winter Orb and Shackles and whatnot. And the fact that the game plan for Golos is a strip mine lock, I just have to try it. So in the games you're about to see, I actually do not have Tabernacle in, so I haven't actually started playing with it. And keep in mind, of course, if you get Urborg out, the Tabernacle will tap for black, and if you get Urborg out with Chromatic Ori, the Tabernacle will essentially tap for anything, which is pretty cool. So in the games you're about to see, I don't have Lantern in here to make Tabernacle tap for a mana of any color, unfortunately. Did take the Chromatic Lantern out. That could be a mistake, and it might make its way back in, but Ori is essentially taking that slot. So, all right. Talking about the games, though. So I played these games yesterday, and yeah, so let's filter for the last 7 days, result, all of it, and as you can see, this deck is just on a tear. But some of these games are just very enjoyable, and I really wanted to share them, including the first one, and I believe the last one, and a number of them in between. Like the decks with the games with Golos just feel so fun. So I'm excited to share them with you. So we'll start by this one against Life Drawing. And we'll go ahead and get that started for you. I noticed the sound in my last video was a little bit over the top, a little crackly. So I've tried to adjust my mic to hopefully not be breathing into it. Hopefully the sound will come out better. I'll keep working on it. Nobody mentioned it, but it was something I didn't care for. Hopefully this is recording a little bit cleaner. All right, so I'm going to pause. All right, so Life Drawing is running Surku Dimer Lobotomist. So it's a legendary human wizard. Whenever my opponent casts a blue spell or a black spell, they exile the top card of target player's library. The opponent cannot cast spells with the same name as the cards exiled by that. Well, that last clause is very close to impossible since it's singleton. The only way that would work is if somehow I gained control of one of my opponent's spells and had the same name as a card he exiled. So basically never. The first two will trigger if he plays a blue and a black spell. Then it'll trigger twice. So other than that, that's the only thing to keep in mind. And so just kind of have to work around the exile effect. It can take key cards out, but I am thoroughly unimpressed by this commander. Anyway, I have a hand that looks like this, and I decided to keep. I'm not going to go with the whole Mox Diamond Ponder thing and then hope to hit a land. I'm going to go with the Ancient Tomb, Sensei's Divining Top play, and hope to hit a land that I could tap the top and then throw Mox Diamond in my hand and cast Ponder, something like that. We'll see how it plays out. So I believe I win the roll. Yeah, of course I'm playing Golos. So I go top, take a look, no lands at all. But there is a Crucible, so if I can find a land, this is going to be really good. Hopefully I don't get wasted or stripped out of this game or soul ringed to death early on. Nothing actually happens in my opponent's first turn. So I draw, I take another look. Every look, by the way, is I'm casting Shock on myself, which is a little bit unfortunate. And for the second time, I don't find a land. So nothing in my top 4. All right, in my top 5, I do find a land. So I decide to do nothing. So the idea here is I'm not going to make a play here. I could tap the top, grab the land, play the land, fetch with it, and cast Ponder, right? Or I could grab the land, throw it away to my Mox Diamond and cast Ponder. Those are a couple plays I could make. But I'm thinking I want to feign weakness. I want to look weak. I'm hoping my opponent taps out on their turn. And then what I can do is I can draw the land naturally, play it, throw it away to Mox Diamond, right? Play Crucible, replay the land, sack, and then do something like Ponder or whatever from there. And I feel pretty good from that board spot, but we'll see how it goes. So my opponent doesn't tap out here. So I'm still going to go for it. They don't have 2 blues, so it's probably safe. So I go for the Mox Diamond into Crucible plan and pause. So if you noticed with the Sensei's Divining Top, the next card on top of my deck, so this is the other reason I made this play. The next card, on top of my deck, and this is why, by the way, I used Mox and I didn't sack my fetch land, is that the next card is a Svine's Reclamation. So the plan was, even if my opponent does counter, they'll probably just follow up by playing their commander and tapping out. And then at that time, I'll draw Svine's. I'll Svine's the Crucible into play, replay the Scalding Tarn, cast my Ponder in, and I'm off to the races. So my opponent does actually have a counter. He can play off a blue X. And I'm totally it hasn't clicked yet on what they just, my brain hasn't fully processed the counterspell that was just played against me. And on their turn, they play Blizzard Spectre, which is either going to cause me to return a permanent of my choice to my hand, or I have to discard a card of my choice. It's pretty damn nasty, honestly. All right, so I top deck Svine's, and I go to cast Svine's, and wait, where's my Crucible? The problem is my opponent played Syncopate, and when Syncopate counters a spell, it exiles it. So I have to just settle for Svine's Scalding Tarn into play instead, which is not the Crucible that I wanted, and I will not be getting a Crucible this game. I do fortunately get a Shuffle and then Ponder into a land. Now, I Svine's that land into play, so I didn't actually make a land drop, so I actually do get to play a land there, and I'm actually even on mana, despite the fact that I didn't play a land on turn 1 or turn 2 or turn 3, I still have 5 mana to my opponent's 5, which is pretty cool. But I'm getting beat down by a Blizzard Spectre. Now, as of right now, my opponent has 5 cards in hand, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 plus a top, which makes 5 and 5. So we're totally even except for the Spectre. So they're up a card, which is the card I pitched to Mox Diamond. However, they're going to make me discard now, and so now I'm going to start taking some hits, right? So the first thing I do is I fetch a Tundra and I take a look with top to see if there's a card that I don't mind giving up off the top of my library and inexplicably, instead of making me discard, my opponent forces me to pick up a card of my choice. So I pick up Tundra, and then he plays like basically a Ravenous Rat. It's Burglar Rat. So it's a Ravenous Rat that affects each opponent, in this case just me. And so I just choose and discard Vandal Blast. I don't see any evidence of artifacts over there, so yeah, that wasn't too painful. It should have been a much worse turn for me. So I'm going to tap and find a Soul Ring, run the Soul Ring out, and attempt to go for Gilded Lotus, hoping for no additional counter this time off of 1 blue. And it does stick, so we're pretty good. But now I'm down to 3 cards, and I'm hoping, please just make me pick up a card. I don't mind picking up Soul Ring at all or a land. But no, my opponent realizes I need to discard. So I choose to discard Merchant Scroll. Now, Merchant Scroll is kind of a bad choice. It's kind of an awkward choice in this. I could be going for... The other option was... I'm not going to discard Mana Drain, but the other option would have been Fierce Guardianship. If I discard Fierce Guardianship, then on this turn I have the ability to like Merchant Scroll for, say, Muddle the Mix... Mystical Teachings, and then I can go and set up like a board clear here, or I can throw the teachings away to the Spectre if I want, replay it, and set up a board clear. However, the reason I do this is because I'm actually planning to play my commander, and having Fierce Guardianship plus Mana Drain with my commander in play sounds really good to me, because I don't want to lose a counter war, and I do have Sensei's Divining Top on the top of the deck, so I can I can continue to like feed the Blizzard Spectre the worst of 3 cards, which isn't the worst for me. Now this creature that my opponent plays exiles up to 2 cards from a graveyard, and they get a life for each creature that they exile. So my opponent's actually able right there to exile Merchant Scroll and Sphinx Reclamation, which super sucks, right? Because Sphinx was going to replay Polluted Delta and a Scalding Tarn. And as much as I would have liked to have Mana Drained that and protected my double land drop, I've got enough lands and I've got a commander who gets more at this point that saving this to protect myself from losing the game is more important than protecting an incremental advantage play when it's not going to make a significant difference to the board. So I do not counter that. I do let them exile. And then post-combat I go for Golos. I clear my attack step, of course, because of Mana Drain. Play my Sensei's Divining Top. I've got 1 mana to activate the top to figure out what I want to throw away to the Blizzard Spectre, and 3 mana to cast Mana Drain, plus I can play Fierce Guardianship for free. So my opponent plays his commander and then activates it via a Liliana's Triumph, which is a Diabolic Edict. So now I have to figure out which card I want to get removed by the commander's triggered ability. So I use Sensei's Divining Top, and I didn't think this through completely, because what I needed to do was put Muddle beneath Strip Mine beneath Cavern of Souls. Let Cavern of Souls get exiled, then tap the top and throw away the Strip Mine to the Blizzard Spectre. The reason we throw Strip Mine away is because theoretically we can replay it, except Crucible and Sphinx are both gone, so we can't. But drawing a Muddle the Mixture is extremely good here, right? Because that's drawing a Demonic Tutor, ultimately. However, I misplay because I don't properly math it all out. I do set it up so Cavern of Souls is on top of Muddle, which is on top of Strip. So the Cavern of Souls gets exiled. That's correct. And then I counter the Triumph with the Fierce Guardianship, so free counter on that. But when my opponent attacks with Blizzard Spectre, I tap the Sensei's Divining Top, and I realized that I would get Muddle the Mixture. So in order to prevent that, I actually have to reorder the cards again, which means I don't have Mana Drain up. So that was a misplay right here. So my opponent's going to swing in, and I realize, oh crap, I have to reorder the cards again, so I do. And then, of course I'm going to grab the Strip Mine. But now I don't have 2 blue up because I ordered that incorrectly. So I throw away the Strip Mine. Okay. And we're done. But I've got an active Golos. So what can an active Golos do for me? Can it do anything good? Well, funny enough, Golos Sensei's Divining Top is a combo because you control the top 3 cards of your library a little bit, and if one of the cards, like let's say it's a permanent, and a spell, well, you put the spell on top, you use Sensei's Divining Top to get the spell into your hand, then you activate Golos and you put Sensei's Divining Top permanent into play, which is fantastic, right? So we're going to go for it, but first, top, activate top, because I know the top card's muddle, remember? And then use Golos, and I hit exactly like I said, permanent, top, grabs the muddle, so I get permanent. Now, I've got 3 mana floating, right? So I'm going to activate Narset. So this is, remember, I'm getting my butt kicked here, and all I've got is a Hail Mary. I've got 1 card in hand, a Sensei's Divining Top on the top of my library, a Golos in play, and just off the strength of Golos, check out these next couple of turns. So I activate Narset, and I grab myself an Imperial Seal, which I can play off the land that I hit. I tutor, and I go get, tap the top. Let's see, what do I get? Copy Artifact, because I want more mana. I still want more mana, right? So now I had 3 mana, so I activated Sensei's Divining Top, then I respond by activating the peak, then I respond by tapping the top. So I get to rearrange the top 3 cards of my deck so that when they play a spell, it will exile not Sensei's Divining Top. However, I screw up as I'm trying to ponder through all this, and I organize the cards exactly as I normally would, which is Sensei's Divining Top on the top and not below the card I want exiled, because I kind of like lose track of Circu's effect next turn. So because I make that mistake, you'll see I'm going to lose my top. But anyway, Copy Artifact gets to make a Gilded Lotus, which once again I want buku mana in play when I have Golos. So on that turn I actually played a Narset, a second Gilded Lotus, an extra land, and a free Sensei's Divining Top. And my opponent pre-combat cast this. Of course, when the top gets exiled, I realize my mistake. As you can see, it's about to go. Let's see if we can advance that a little bit. Sorry. Circu puts it under itself. Yeah, so this top's gone. He can't replay it. I guess it just stores it there. I don't know why it stores it there. Actually, I don't. Oh, it's because I can't cast spells with the same name. So it's to let me know that I can't cast any Sensei's Divining Tops. Anyway, it goes for a big 6 mana play, which would cause me to empty my hand. 6 mana play that's incredibly good on the Blizzard Spectre. I'm going to, of course, mana drain that, so I'm going to get 6 mana next turn. And then my opponent's going to get to attack and take away my Muddle the Mixture. Also sends in with these, so I'm not quite sure why, but I go ahead and just block there. Oh, it's because he wanted to kill Narset, so he was willing to trade his commander for Narset. Actually, I agree with that. So I draw this instead of top, and I'm like, oh, what did I do? But I do get to tithe here, and I actually get 2. My opponent's ahead on lands, so I do get to get 2 lands here. All right, now I activate Golos, and I'm going to stop for a second on what I hit. Winter Orb, Treachery, and City of Brass. So I get to play a free Winter Orb, a free Treachery. After it comes into play, I'm going to tap some mana, right? I'm going to float some mana. Taking the Spectre, untapping all the lands, which means because I played a free Treachery, I now actually get to tap more mana, and I get to Golos again. This turn is so sick, right? This is the power of Golos, right? Hitting a Teferi and an Expedition map. Okay, and I still have enough mana to Golos again, hitting Spellseeker Factor Fiction. At this point, my opponent says, he was being pretty cool, but says, I'm going to see if I can show the chat log. Basically, when my opponent joined the game, because my tagline in Magic Online says, abandon hope, all ye who enter here. My opponent joined the game and said, I'm full of hope. And then at this point, my opponent said, I have no hope, and put all 5 cards in one pile. And so, of course, I take the pile of 5. And that's a concession, right? So I go ahead and Spellseeker, grab a counter spell, which is just incredible. Play some of the cards that my opponent gave me, untap some lands with the Winter Orb in play, and just like that, Golos completely flips the game. Like, How gross was that? I didn't have this. I didn't have this. I didn't have this. I didn't have these two cards. I didn't have this card. I didn't have this card. I didn't have all these cards. I didn't have him. I got it all off my commander. I activated it 3 times, right? Which is insane. Like how this is a 7 mana ability, and I spent 21 mana and ended the turn with 5 mana untapped. It's so gross. Anyway, so that was super exciting. I really enjoyed that game, and good way to start the day. All right, so we moved on to this game against Spizzleby. Spizzleby, and I don't know what Spizzlebee's playing here. Let's take a look. The first sliver, so not competitive, but look at this. I've got Transmute Artifact. So this is tech for this deck, and we're gonna see. Hopefully, I think this game you're gonna get to see how utterly insane Transmute Artifact is in this deck. All right, so a land pass. Oh, very nice. I get a vamp, so I'm actually gonna get Golos down next turn, theoretically, assuming I don't have to defensively Vampiric Tutor. I don't, so I'm gonna go ahead and vamp here, and I'm pretty sure I just go get Workshop. Soul Ring, right? Because I have the Ancient Tomb, so I can still run out the commander. So I go ahead and run out the commander, and I'm gonna go get Strip Mine because I've got tons of mana here. And we'll go ahead and set up for a winning the death blow. Opponent plays a Signet and passes. I'm gonna go ahead and Strip Mine them so they can't cast anything here. I draw a lucky Thran Dynamo, which is just even better than what I was already planning to do. So I run out the Dynamo, transmute him, pay the mana with Thran Dynamo. Chromatic Ori's in play a land, tap for a ton, and recast Golos. Because why not? And let's go get a Wasteland while we're at it. What a sick turn that is. All right, so my opponent taps for a bunch of mana, and now plays their Sliver, cascades into Homing Sliver. But I now have an active Golos with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, plus 5 is 16 mana to start my turn. All right, 17 mana. I'm not going to play the land, though. You don't want to play lands before you use Golos because you want to... and here's the beauty of it. I can tap for 5 and 2. I can tap this and a Soul Ring and activate Golos' ability. Like, how ridiculous is this? So anyway, you don't want to play land before Golos because if you hit lands, you want to be able to play them. All right, so let's go. I'm converting all the mana and Swords to Plowshares, land. Okay, I'll plow. Now, I actually probably should not have played a land here. I should have waited, done all my Golos activations, and then played the best land from the bunch would be the correct way to do this. But I'm excited, and I play the land ahead of time. And I guess I was kind of thinking, like, I want to thin the deck out of one more land because I don't want to hit any more lands. But that's silly. Thinning one card out of 80-something, it's only an 80th better. That's not a good reason to do it. It's better to hold all your lands because if you hit Strip Mine, I'd feel really like bad about this play, right? So, all right. So once again, I get a tap for 3, 4, 5, and 2 other mana, 6, 7. So I got Wasteland, by the way, here, only because, like, in anticipation of my opponent getting I already have Strip Mine. I guess I couldn't have done that, but anyway, only in anticipation of my opponent playing a non-basic. I could have incidentally gotten Tabernacle here, and it may have been very good to pressure my opponent's creature, and also to recur the Golos potentially, should I choose. But at any rate, I'm going to go ahead and spin the wheel again on Golos, and I get Vandal Blast. So I go to play it with Overload, and it won't let me, which I didn't think that was correct. I thought you should be able to play it with Overload, but yeah, whatever. I Vandal Blast this artifact, and then at that point, my opponent gives up. Of course, my opponent presumably doesn't realize this, but I'm probably just slamming Winter Orb here. My opponent's all tapped out, especially now that I killed one of their artifact mana. And then off of, even if I slam Winter Orb, I can untap Ancient Tomb, tap Tomb, Soul Ring, and Dynamo, and activate Golos and tap this thing, and this thing, and activate Golos again. Even under a Winter Orb, I can spend 14 mana. It's just crazy. I love this deck. It's so fun. All right, so that's the end of that one, though. And we move into the next game against Martis. All right. So Martis game, and my opponent is playing Lord Windgrace. I have to take a mulligan, but I mulligan into a very nice hand here with the dual planeswalkers. So Lord Windgrace is the commander who, I'm going to pause. It's the commander who you discard a card, then draw. If a land is discarded, they get to draw 2. And for -3, they can pick up 2 lands from the graveyard and put them directly into play. So it's a super crucible. And then for 11, I don't know, it does something. They probably win the game. Basically, like, you never need to worry about it on this guy because, I don't know, what is it? Destroy 6 non-land permanents, create 6 cats with Forest Walk. Basically 11, he wins the game. But the main use of this is either to draw additional cards by pitching land and drawing 2 cards, or to recur, strip mine lock your opponent, right? And my opponent has a great start. First turn Mox Diamond into land into Lotus Cobra. Pretty bad news, but Lotus Cobra only has 1 toughness. So I'm going to go ahead and fetch a blue-red land, which will give me access to all the colors I need, just not a full enough amount of mana, but Renin 6 should be able to fix that. So I kill that immediately. Probably go Sylvan Library, Ancient Tomb. My goodness, what a draw. So I pick up my land here. I do get down Oko, and I make some food, and I pass. I would have liked to have nuked their Mox Diamond, but it's just too dangerous. They'll attack Renin 6, and it's not looking good for me. So opponent pays a little life with Sylvan, then Demonic Tutors and life from the Loams. So they're definitely in on the land plan. As for me, I get to pick up a land. I get to play Golos, and I do get to finally turn the Mox Diamond into a 3/3. This is another sweet thing about Golos, is that the 3/3s that you make with Oko line up very well with the 3/5 that Golos is. So I pass for the turn. Of course, I get Strip Mine, but I can't use it just yet. But that sets me up for a Strip Mine Renin 6. And if my opponent kills Golos, they can only attack Renin 6 down to 1 toughness, not 0. So I'm in pretty good shape, Not great, though, because my opponent is an active Sylvan. But my opponent takes a look at their 3 cards and decides to skip. They're pretty far behind on mana. And technically they're behind on cards. They do have more cards in hand, but if you add up all the cards that are available to them, they've got 8 cards in hand. They can make it 10 with Sylvan's life. So that would be 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 cards total. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So pretty close, but on the next turn, I'm going to get to pick up an extra land, and I'm going to draw for the turn, so that's 14, 15, and I get to Oko something. And if it's an exchange of food for a creature, which is what I was planning to do, then I actually kind of set them, this is nothing, right? So then they go down to 14 cards, and I go up to 16 cards, so basically I'm ahead at that point. So that's why I say I'm a little bit ahead here. But more importantly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I am very close to ultimating Golos. I can strip mine my opponent, pick up the strip mine, replay it, strip mine them again, untap the Grim at the end of their turn. And then on the next turn, I can pick up the strip mine them yet again, and then tap the Grim and play Arcane Signet, and then I guess I'd be 1 short, so I'd actually have to hold off on stripping them that next turn. But I can play the Arcane Signet, and I can go with Golos, which is huge. Anyway, opponent scoop. So I felt like that was a premature scoop, but I also don't know what was going on over there. So maybe strip mine with Renin 6 was just too much for the opponent, and potentially Renin 6 could have been, I don't know, but perhaps Renin 6 was suppressing. Like, they may have had a lot of cards, but if a lot of their cards had 1 toughness creatures, then, or overcosted stuff, then maybe it wasn't really doing them a ton of good there. All right, Flantastic is playing Rada Heart of Keld. I have to take a mulligan, and I mulligan into this hand here, and I am fortunately going first. I go ahead and put, I believe, some mana on top. I actually shuffled away a Vandal Blast. Thinking that, outside of like a few obvious ones, the Rada Heart of Keld, so Rada, I'm going to pause for a sec. Rada, if it's my opponent's turn, it has first strike, that doesn't matter, but they can look at the top card of their library and play lands from the top of their library, and then it has an ability to do a lot of damage if they get up to 7 mana, 6 mana. Anyway, the point is, Rada is a card that I don't want it in play because it acts like because it lets them play lands for free, which isn't good. for the whole suppression game. But um, typically, you're not going to see a heavy artifact base for a deck like this. You're going to see a mana base, right? You're going to see like cultivates and things of that nature, Farseeks, that kind of stuff. So I wasn't as worried about maintaining the Vandal Blast. That's why I shuffled it away. But also, I had the Vandal Vindicate if I really needed to as a backup plan. And I had mana drain. So if my opponent did go Soul Ring and then I went land and pass and then my opponent went for a big play off the Soul Ring, I could mana drain, use the mana to then destroy the Soul Ring and potentially do some development on my side. So for all those reasons, I shuffled it away in the hopes that I would find better cards. And I do. I find this Jace here. So I get to play a land, sit on my mana drain and pass. Opponent plays Garrick's Undoing. So it's commenting on a bunch of stuff, and basically turns out to be kind of a bad sport. But there are bad sports. It's fine. Anyway, for my turn, I go ahead and just Vindicate Command Tower. Opponent was talking about I don't know how having my foils or something makes me a bad player. I don't know. None of what my opponent was saying makes particular sense. I did refer them to the channel so that they could either get a chance to review the game or they could improve their game or whatever they want to do. But this was one of those kind of some players you don't really want to engage in a long conversation with. Opponent's telling me I'm good at excuses, and I don't know. I was talking about how and they were talking about how they're much smarter than me, and I said. Basically, this was my explanation to my opponent. My explanation to my opponent about the foils was I didn't go into the whole thing where it actually just makes it easier for me to organize my inventory, which is the main, like that's the main benefit of it, is that you can sort by foils and then only the good cards are there because I got rid of all the foils. Every single trash foil I had is on a different account, all of it. So all I have is just the good foils for making decks. So I can build something like 95+% of most decks with just my foils. So if I sort that way, and then the cards I want to fill in that don't come in foil, I have to search for specifically, like Throne of the High City or whatever. But it's not too bad. That being said, the other advantage though is occasionally psychological. So you sit down, you play all these expensive, all these foils and blinged out cards, right? And some players, it really gets in their head and they waste a lot of time thinking about it, or it creates a feeling of nervousness in them. And so that feeling gives you an edge in the game, right? You don't have to do anything. It's just free. It's just, here's a benefit for you with no effort at all. Like, I'm not making my deck any worse whatsoever. I don't have to put any thought into it on my end. I just sit down, I enjoy my cards, and I enjoy looking at my cards and my opponent feels nervous, right? Same reason I would always, back in the day, I always would play all beta duels and all beta cards whenever I could. And original art, I love the way they look. I think it's beautiful. And I love a lot of the art in Magic, and I want the art to be as pretty as it can be. And art looks better in beta, but or alpha, I suppose. But I was more of a beta guy. But anyway, then the other thing is that, but also take whatever edge you can. Take whatever edge you can. I mean that's just good. That's just good play. So I mentioned that to my opponent. He says, "Well, I'm much smarter than you." And I said, "Well, Magic is a combination of intellect, preparation, and practice." And I said, "I don't mind if you have the advantage in 1 out of 3 areas, because clearly." Preparation and practice, not so much, but maybe he is smarter than me. I mean, that's okay. So anyway, but he doesn't manage to win this game, and I do believe I may have blocked him just because it was just a long string of bad sportsmanship. So, Flantastic, if you're watching and I doubt it, but if you watch the video and that wasn't your intent, you can always leave a comment and I'll unblock you and we can play, and no hard feelings, but that was the impression that I got. All right, so moving on, I get to play against Dr. Evo. Dr. Evo here. And pause. I had to take a mulligan. So I decided to do something really crazy for a minute. I was just really interested in finding out if I could and I don't have a version. I don't have a version to show you, but I was curious if I could take out. So let's take a look. There's only 4 creatures in this deck. That's it. So there's Snapcaster. So I'm going to move Mind Twist over here. We do not cut Mind Twist from our decks ever. All right. So Snapcaster, Trinket, Spellseeker, and Urza. Right. 4 of the most powerful creatures in the entire format. Of course, they're all blue. They're all humans. I think they're all wizards too. Yeah, human wizards are the human artificer. There we go. But anyway, humans, blue humans seem to be where it's at. And anyway, so those are the 4 creatures that I'm running. I don't actually run Dark Confidant because deck has almost no life gain. Artie's cut Necro. Artie has Sylvan. That's the Dark Confidant. And I can't afford to be taking like random hits for 7 and 5. I just can't afford that. So I'm not running the Confidant in this deck. But anyway, so I took the 4 humans out, and what I did instead, and there were 2 versions of Oath that I played with. So I'm going to move these cards over just a bit, and I'll show you what they were. So I'm always going to run Oath and Blessing, and then from there I had 2 versions. So one version is Sphinx and Angel, and I like this version a lot, probably a little bit more than I like the other version. It's a little bit too fair, perhaps, but I actually had these 2, and then instead of Tabernacle, I ran this guy. I ran the Abyss, so I also had no Tabernacle. So I took these 5 cards out, and I put these 5 cards in. So that was one version. The Abyss does not affect Angel because of the templating. It says Shroud instead of Hexproof. So the original version of Hexproof was Shroud, which means you can't put equipment on it, but it also means you can't kill it with your own Abyss. And in fact, this thing flies, so if you wanted to, you could run Moat as well, and then you could have Moat, Abyss, and these 2 cards, and Oath of Druids, and none of your big threats there would be affected. Moat gets in the way of Tezzeret, though, so I didn't bother, but something to think about. Anyway, so I ran and of course Sphinx is an artifact creature. So you can force a will with these blue creatures. You can swim them through the Abyss. You can cheat them into play off Oath. And if you activate your commander, you can hit these guys. Also, keep in mind Sphinx is an artifact that you can potentially transmute into. So looking at all that, I was like, I really like this. The other version I ran that I played around with ran this guy. No Abyss. It ran Glenelendra Archmage, and it ran Jin Gatoxis. Where's the biggins? No, didn't have these 2 cats. So I ran Glen, Jin, and then it ran, I think, Wargate, which is like one more way to go get an Oath, but it's also a way that for 3 mana you can put a Mana Crypt into play, or you can go get a Mishra's Workshop and so forth. So I ran this version here, which, or maybe I just ran Felwar. I don't remember. It was Wargate or Felwar. I think it might have been Wargate, though. Anyway, but the point is, so I ran this version, and I think that's the version you're about to see. Both of the versions are pretty cool, but when I showed it to Brian, he was like, I don't know how I feel about that, because, frankly, he said, the commander is so powerful, you just don't need the gimmicks. Now, between the 2 versions, I actually think the other version is better. This version is worse because Jin Gatoxis forces you to draw 7 cards every turn, and you think that's good, but we don't have a combo. This is a control deck, and so you can very easily deck yourself if you're not careful, and you'll see a game that comes very close to that happening. And plus, the commander produces so much card advantage, you just don't need more card advantage. Whereas the Angel Sphinx play are super defensive and ensure you're not going to get burnt out. You can't. You're not going to get beat down. Basically, you're just immune to damage. And then you can throw Golos out, who also is not affected by the Abyss. And then you can just generate card advantage after card advantage with Golos while beating your opponent in the face. I mean, you're going to win pretty quickly and pretty easily. So I like that version a much better, but the version you're going to see is this one here. And between the 2, basically, I think this is just more consistent and cleaner and easier to use than running the Imperial Sphinx and whatnot. But if you are going to run Oath, that's the way I recommend doing it. You get to run the Abyss. You get to run these two commanders. You get to run Blessing. So the way Blessing works is you have to be a little bit cautious, but you want to hit Blessing with Oath. If you ever somehow end up with a Blessing in your graveyard where it does not belong, what you do is on the turn before you're going to Oath, you play Mystic Sanctuary and you put Blessing on top of your library, and then you Oath through it to reshuffle, and then that's your protection. If for some reason, yet again, Blessing ends up somehow in your graveyard, you can strip mine your own Sanctuary. It's the only play you can really make to get the Blessing back in and then replay it using Ren and 6 or Crucible. But on the other hand, if you have Oath out that long, you will have won the game anyway in like every game imaginable. So it's not that big of a deal. But as you'll see, that play is super important in the games to come. So we'll run through that. And it's only because I was using the wrong mix. Incidentally, if you really, really want to play defensively, and this may be the switch that you do for multiplayer, maybe you do switch to Oath, then you can run Moat and the Abyss, because while Golos and Tezzeret are affected by it, Imperial Archangel, Sphinx of the Steel Wind are not. And that's a fantastic way to just sit there and be like, look, nobody gets creatures, and if they do have creatures, they're not attacking me or my planeswalkers, and I'm just going to beat people in the face, and I can't be burned out, and you're not going to, Sphinx of the Steel Wind doesn't tap, and you have to deal more than 8 damage to get through the Archangel, plus I have Oath to loop them. Like, it's just too good, right? So that might be the multiplayer version, along with one or two other changes. I'm going to touch on that as well in multiplayer. If you're going to sideboard, basically like change the deck up for multiplayer, you might also include something along the lines with Mycosynth Lattice and Karn as your kind of finishers. So you get to run the Oath combo and you get to run Lattice and Karn, and really kind of, and of course, instead of Tabernacle, what you do is, oh yeah, that's what I had. Instead of Tabernacle, I had, what's it called? The land. I had Forbidden Grove, so that you can go get Forbidden Grove with Golos, and then you can force your opponent to have creatures. So anyway, that's the switch for multiplayer, but I tried it out in 1v1 to see how it would go, and, well, you'll see. All right, so let's get to it. I believe, was it against Dr. Evo? Did I already run through this game? We'll get caught up here. And then I've got, the last few games are even better, I promise. But I do want to play those games, so let's take a look. Yeah. Dr. Evo. Okay, so game 1. And look at this. Forbidden Orchard. No, I make a huge screw up here, and I mulligan, so I actually get to put Blessing on the bottom, which is a good thing, right? The worst thing about this hand is holding Blessing. The fact that it's a mulligan is great. Now, the correct play for me here is first turn, something like this. First turn, Urborg, Imperial Seal, go get Force Will. Second turn, Orchard, cast Oath of Druids, Force with Copy Artifact. Opponent here is playing SRAM, so that should just be a win. However, I get greedy, and it hurts. It makes my life bad. So I start out by getting Force of Will. All well. Everything's good. But then my opponent has this crazy start, right? Map, Crypt, Soul Ring. I'm going, oh my gosh, he has so much mana here. And this thing which gets more land. And instead of doing Oath of Druids, I'm like, no, I need to catch up on mana. So I copy artifact this and then realize, what did I just do? I can't cast Force of Will now. Okay, that's fine. All I have to do is draw a blue card. I got lots of blue cards, right? Opponent strip mines my city. Okay, well, that's all right. In fact, I'm glad to see it because I have Orchard now. Plays a guy. That's pretty good. No blue card here. Fine, I'll just go Oath. What are the chances, right? What are the chances that he can kill the Oath? He has to kill it like right now. Well, the chances are really high. Far Shrieker lets him play an equipment and draw a card, and then, oh, we're going to bug out. My opponent plays, this is not what happened. My opponent played Oblivion Ring and exiles my Oath. And for the next few turns, I take a pretty hefty beatdown. I have to go get Workshop, and I have to give him another creature, and I play my commander, and I start developing, and basically I take a bunch of damage over time. My opponent removes my commander, I think, or I can't remember what it was. And I'm not finding a blue card or any way to deal with the Oblivion Ring. But eventually, I think I use my commander, and I hit like Teferi off of it or something, and I'm able to nuke the thing holding the oath down, and then from there I oath, and I go get Jin Gitoxis, and then from there I'm drawing 7 cards per turn, over and over and over, and I win. So we try again. So we go into game round 2. That should have been like a turn 2 kill, but instead I made my life miserable by misplaying, which is exactly what misplaying should do. So I do manage to win, though, and we move into round 2, and my opponent's playing, this time, Nin the Pain Artist, because Dr. Evo is, as it turns out, a fan of the channel. So we had a nice conversation, and also a big fan of Brian. Probably a bigger fan of Brian. So we have a nice conversation. He says, I've got something for you. You might recognize it. It should be pretty good. And I had a feeling it might be Nin, just based on the hints that he was dropping. And sure enough, it's Nin the Pain Artist. So look at this hand I have to keep against Nin. Very risky keep here, but I'm going for it. My opponent is Mox Amber, which is actually pretty interesting in Nin, but I'm like, okay, well, just don't have a counter spell here, and I'm in good shape. And we start right off with a Condescend on Enlightened Tutor, which makes perfect sense because he can't Condescend the Mana Crypt that I would have liked to have gotten, and I do not top deck a land. I'm in bad shape. Plays the Seed of the Sign-On, fabricates for Mana Crypt, of course. No, Gilded Lotus, I thought. Okay, so I'm in a Mystical Tutor at the end of their turn. Because it's not worth risking trying to find a land here, I'm just going to go for this and hope. And it does work, so I get to play Plateau and pass. I do have Plow up, so I'm a little bit secure against Nin. Now I screw up really, really badly here. I do. This is idiotic. So I actually play Plow here, which makes no sense. The time to play Plow is with Nin's ability on the stack. It's going to use it at the end of my turn on one of these turns. He's going to go all in on Nin, and then you plow the Nin in response so that they've wasted a ton of mana and wasted a turn. By doing it the way that I do it now, my opponent actually gets to counter that. So he does disallow. The Mox Amber's turned on, of course, because Nin's in play, and I'm in big trouble here. But I do have an Arcane Signet and a Copy Artifact and a Blessing, which this is the unfortunate thing about having the Oath. Remember, this is still the Oath version. The Blessing does find me a City of Brass, though, which is pretty good. I don't play Copy Artifact because, remember, he tutored for Lotus, and that's what I want to copy. So my opponent jams out a ton of mana, and I rip Oath off the top. Copy the Lotus, run out a Treachery, untap my lands, don't mind... So as much as Oath, as cute as Oath would be against Nin, my opponent would get to just kill his Nin and draw a million cards, but combining it with Treachery means I can actually play the Oath and take his guy, and then let him Oath. If he Oaths up like a Trinket Mage or something, then who cares? Because then that means that I'm going to be able to do the exact same play. Kill my own Nin, Brain Geyser for a bunch, and then my opponent's left with a creature in play, which will trigger my Oath, and I will have totally won by then. Oh, I get to steal his Gilded Lotus too, and boom, down comes the Oath. So this is pretty bad for my opponent, but he's going to, in desperation with the Oath, he's going to run it, and look how lucky this is. I'm not bitter or anything, but he hits Spellseeker. Oh, actually, never mind. I was thinking he hit something else. So he hits Spellseeker, which is awesome. Uses Spellseeker to get Rolling Earthquake. Makes total sense because now he can kill the Nin and clear the Spellseeker, which means Oath is safe. But due to the change to Rolling Earthquake, and the way that Earthquake effects work in general, he will not be able to kill Dak Faden here, which is kind of a bigger problem for him. Or at least that's what I thought. He's got by force. Look at that. Kills the Lotus and the Signet, and then makes the board clearing play. Brutal. But is down to only one card, and I still have a Dak Faden in play. So I draw Mystical Tutor, I Mystical. And my opponent then Mysticals, which I find to be really interesting. So I think that what happened is, so I have pauses during my combat step, and this throws people off because for a lot of people after the main, it just jumps to the end step. So my opponent Mystical Tutored there into an empty hand. He got Amnesia, so I just plus stack up targeting my opponent and force him to he got, looks like either Mana Leak or Amnesia, but I plus Dak Faden and force my opponent to discard the 2 cards that he had on top. So the card that I Mystical Tutored for, which was Demonic Tutor, is chilling out on top of my library. And so I just play Vidalcan Shackles and pass. That gives me another defense against Nin here. Opponent is now down to no cards in hand and no useful commander, which is huge. So I'm going to go for a Demonic Tutor off the top. Opponent only has 1 card, so what are the chances, right? That is a counter. Turns out pretty good. Crap. Okay. Well, it is Nin after all. So I go ahead and just make him draw 2 and discard 2 because I want to plus stack again, and I don't want to use that on myself. And I'm not willing to minus stack in order to grab that crypt. I want to keep Dak in play. It's so disruptive against him that it's worth the risk that he finds a way to kill it now, because if he doesn't find a way to kill it, then I get the payout is huge. So I get to take a tapped mana crypt. I play a talisman. All right, I take a mana crypt. He doesn't tap it in response, so I get to play a talisman and then run out Golos, which it's a pretty big deal, right? So I'm going to run out Golos and get Forbidden Orchard. Nasty combo with Oath. So now opponent can Oath again, and does Oath, I believe. We'll see what he reveals. Oaths through a bunch of stuff and reveals Phyrexian Metamorph, but look what happened. That's not an Oath deck over there, and he Oath through all but 9 cards in his library. Metamorph Golos, leaving him with 7 cards in his library. He does get a strip mine. He actually correctly realized he didn't have a strip. So he's actually able to get a strip to kill the Orchard upcoming, but it's not before I'm going to get to Oath at least once. Does play a Soul Ring and Maze of Ith, which isn't super useful there, and has no other play. All right, so now I get to just run out Oath, and then, of course, game's pretty well over here. So I don't know. The replays really have a problem with Oath of Druids too. This is another reason not to play it, honestly. It's just it kills my replays. See, this is happening all the time. But basically, yeah. I think he's okay here, and we have a little conversation about it. Is it going to advance at all? I mean, my opponent's okay here, but look, he's 7 cards in the library, no cards in hand, so I'm going to DAC my opponent here and drop him to 5. And then I think I activate Golos, and I don't remember what I hit. But I also use Forbidden Orchard to do it, and that puts an extra guy into play, and then my opponent strip mines the Orchard, attacks with Golos and the guy both at DAC. I block Golos on Golos, and I steal his guy with Shackles. Then for my untap step, I untap the Shackles, so he gets his guy back, and I still get to Oath. And I Oath into, like, Glenelendra. And then I plus stack, hitting my opponent again, dropping him to 2 cards in his library, and then the next turn I DAC my opponent, and he dies. So that was that game. All right, so game 2 against Dr. Evo playing Nin, heavily inspired by Brian, but not an exact match, obviously. And I've got this hand, which I decide I'm going to keep. It's very risky, but once again, massive payout if I can hit. So I'm going to run this out, because any mana lets me play my commander here, and I've got Transmute Artifact. So I get first turn Talisman. My opponent gets a savagely fast draw here. Look at this. And I get a land, so I get to run out my commander. This is beautiful. So I get to run out my commander and go get Ancient Tomb. So first turn, artifact mana. Second turn, Golos fetching Ancient Tomb. Opponent goes for Phyrexian Metamorph, copying, I believe, Golos, which is pretty solid, because then he can go get a Strip Mine or a Wasteland to kill my Workshop. And then plays a... I'm going to pause. So this is actually a pretty cool play my opponent does. So he plays Golos off of Phyrexian Metamorph and gets a Wasteland, then copy artifacts to Golos, and so they're legends, so he can only keep one, but he then goes to get a Strip Mine. So he's got a Wasteland Strip Mine to deal with both of these lands. Unfortunately for my opponent, I have Transmute Artifact and an Ancient Tomb. I can't use the Workshop, but... Bye, Golos. Chromatic Ori. Into... This is so savage. Tezzeret. You know how this game's played, right? All right, into Tezzeret. Untap. Now I've got 5, 6. Mana of any color, basically. +3 in the wings. Narset. It sticks. Fabricate. Go get Winter Orb. Tap for 3. Winter Orb. Sensei's Divining Top. I can Narset, but I'm not going to because of Golos, and I'm done. So let's just take a look at my turn 3. This is turn 3. What is this commander? I love it so much. This is so savage. I love it. But it's really cool because the commander on its own just got an Ancient Tomb. That's all it did. It was a 5 mana rampant growth, right? Like, that's not that great. But because of the interaction between the rest of the deck, because the deck is designed well, Brian's suggestion about Transmute Artifact paying off massive dividends here, it's just so cool. I mean, what a beautiful, beautiful turn. Anyway, so the opponent does manage to bounce the Ori, which sets me back quite a bit, and attacks Tezzeret. Wisely, I believe, because he can deal with Tezzeret first and then worry about Narset later. Unfortunately for my opponent, I drew I Tezzeret for 1 and get a mana vault, and then use that mana to replay Ori. And then, of course, I transmute Muddle here and just play my Oath of Druids. And Tezzeret's going to die, but this is the Oath version of the deck. So the Oath version of the deck, and my opponent, kills a Workshop here, but the Oath version of the deck doesn't care. Once it starts oathing, the game is over. So we're going to Oath, and boom, there's Jin-Kataxis. And yeah, this is about over. Let's go ahead and add insult to injury. We'll Yogg Will, play a bunch of stuff from the graveyard, play a Tezzeret, get tons more mana, play Transmute Artifact, go get a Gil Lotus, use Gil Lotus to fabricate, go get a Soul Ring, use a Soul Ring mana to cast Oko, because, that's what happens when you have an Ori into play. Give my opponent a 3/3, because Oko and Oath is a heck of a combo. And yeah. Oh yeah, and draw 7 to make my opponent discard their hand. My opponent has some cool toys that he wanted to show off to the crowd there. He doesn't bother swinging in. He could have swung in and killed one of my planeswalkers, or damaged one of my planeswalkers, but he doesn't. Now I Oath into Glenelendra. So now I've got Glenelendra running. I just plow that, activate, play this. And even though I have a Grim Monolith untapped, I can actually spend 3 mana and sacrifice Glenelendra multiple times if my opponent had an instant during combat. He doesn't. So even if my opponent blocks here, it's precisely lethal amounts of damage. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 points of damage, and my opponent was at 35 because of the Ancient Tomb. So with, like I said, Grim Monolith fuels Glenelendra thanks to the power of Chromatic Ori being just amazing for this deck. Awesome game there. Oath is super cool and super fun. I really think there's something to it, but it might just be something might just be best for a multiplayer, not necessarily 1v1. I don't really know. Tom, come out of there, son. All right, so I've got a. There you go. All right, so I've got a game against Farers, and he is in fact playing the Farer deck. He's playing. Hold on a moment, Thomas. You can stand there, but you can't hog the camera and do those types of things. Okay? You can be in the camera. You can wave quietly. All right. Oh, is it time for bed? Yes. Say bye. All right. Sorry about all that. Anyway, it's I love that stuff. Actually, I just it just makes it a little trickier to make videos uninterrupted, but that's okay. It's well worth it. Anyhow, so Farers here is playing Tuvasa the Sunlit, which it grows based on the number of enchantments in play, and my opponent draws a card for the first enchantment spell they play each turn. Unfortunately, just nowhere near the power level of like an Argothian Enchantress, which draws off every enchantment you play. So I wouldn't even consider this a build around me card when you have to play an enchantment, stop, wait. Play an enchantment, stop, wait. Yeah, I don't think that's good. But I admire, I appreciate the interest that my opponent would have in trying to play around this and see what they could do with it. I mean, I can definitely appreciate that. So anyway, opponent leads off with a Hallowed Fountain. I keep this draw here mainly because it has fast mana, and fast mana with this commander is really good. But also it has Force of Will to deal with an early Soul Ring. I top deck a Sylvan Library, and my opponent goes Crypt here, and I had to think about this pretty hard because as obvious as it seems, if you watch what just happened, to Force of Will, and I decided to do it with a Ponder, to Force of Will the Mana Crypt here, it was a real risk doing that into 2 blue, because if my opponent had, like, imagine if you're playing against this deck. I play a second land and I cast Crypt pre-combat. You Force of Will, and I mana drain that Force of Will. Now the Crypt comes down, I get 5 mana, 5 plus 2 is 7, run out Ori, run out the commander. Like, you basically lose the game on the spot. So I thought about it. And what fueled my decision to do it was that I don't have a lot of game if I have like if I let that go, I have to force a will the spell that's going to come after it. But then the one that comes after that and the one that comes after that, which is pretty bad, over the course of the next few turns. And of course, I can't keep that up. But also, I'm looking at this commander thinking, well, they're going to be playing enchantments, and those enchantments probably have, they probably, like, there's various enchantments across the board in terms of cost, but you would expect to see some higher end enchantments in a deck like this, and that means that there's less likely to have more permission. And so, there's only one mana drain. So I just felt it was worth the risk because the upside was high enough. Fortunately, it did land, so my turn I get to vault. Now this tells me they don't have a counter because they would have countered if they had one. So and I find a Mox Opal. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and actually fabricate for a Soul Ring. I get to run out Opal. I get to run out Sylvan Library. It was a tremendous draw for me right there, and I get to pass the turn. Pretty good stuff. All right. So my opponent then plays Tuvasa. So they're going to get to draw an extra card for each enchantment. I am, of course, going to look at 3 cards and I find Workshop. Oh my goodness. And Artifact mana and a Tutor. I'm going to pay and keep all that. Use 5 mana to play the Commander here. Fetching a Strip Mine. And then I'm going to go ahead and run out Talisman and plow the Commander right now before... I don't want him to be able to play an enchantment and draw even a single card if I can help it. They do run out Femerith Enchantress, which will draw them cards if enchantments die, but my opponent doesn't even have an enchantment in play yet. And then look at this, I find Ori. So I go ahead and just hardcast the Ori here, strip mine my opponent, and now on my opponent's turn I have 5 mana. I can tap this for 5 and cast Force of Negation and cast Mana Leak on my opponent's turn. But on the next turn, I have Sylvan Library Golos with an Ori to fuel it, so an Ori and a Soul Ring will power it. But Sylvan Library Golos means I get to pay life to keep all the non-permanents and put them in my hand, or however it ends up. But basically, I get to leave the permanents on top of my deck and then hit them off the Golos consistently, which is super busted. So at any point, Ferrers decides to pack it in, and I have 3 really cool games against Paul DeRoche. And I believe for these 3 games, I was not running Tabernacle. I think I was running Felwar Stone, but I'm not 100%, but I think I had taken out I think I'd gone ahead and taken out the Oath package by now. All right, so we'll know pretty soon, though, how this plays out, but I'm pretty sure I did. So my opponent's playing Memnarch, which is actually a really interesting card for this deck and something to think about. Super interesting card, actually. But anyway, without getting too far down that road, I've got a very nice keepable hand with a 7-drop and only 1 mana. Perfect hand. So I'm going to go ahead and tutor for an Imperial Seal and pass. My opponent plays a Zalfin Void. They get to scry. So I, of course, got Workshop and pass. Opponent then plays an island and is done for the turn. I'm going to vamp at the end of their turn and go get Crucible. It sticks, so I'm allowed to replay my Marsh Flats, and I'm suddenly in a phenomenal position here. Opponent goes for a Mystical Tutor and use it to get a Day's Undoing, I believe. Yep, Day's Undoing. Fires it off, and I'm going to try to counter the Time Twister with a Mana Drain, and use the Mana Drain to fuel a Ori. So I'm going to replay a land from the graveyard. Oh, or do I play Ori? Or yeah, I play Ori, not the commander. All right, so I run that out. Boom. Tap that for 5 rather. Spended the 5 colorless to play Narset. Impulse into a Soul Ring, which allows me to actually sack and play my commander, or transmute for Winter Orb, which I decide to do, overplaying my commander for a turn because I'm going to untap Workshop and play my commander. All right, if I want to, I impulse. Go ahead and cast Golos here. I now have Golos Strip Mine under a Winter Orb, which is pretty good, I hear. Opponent fetches or something in response. Yeah, fetches? No. Never mind, I fetch in response, right? And then I use Brainstorm. And Preordain, finding myself a Teferi, which is also pretty good with the which is also pretty good with the Winter Orb in play and pass for the turn. I should have left Teferi on top of my library due to Golos' ability. Anyway, my opponent plays a Hanger Backwalker and passes. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and run out I'm going to close their commander. It's not coming down this game. I'll give you I'll let you in on a secret. All right, so I'm going to play my Teferi there. I play Oko, strip my opponent's mana, go ahead and plus up, and use Oko to make some food and pass for the turn. Untapping 2 lands. I've got another strip mine in play. Strip mine the opponent's land that they untap during their upkeep. I'm, of course, trying to eliminate all of the cards in my opponent's hand as well as all of their permanents because, that's what I like to do. So I leave a land on top here, and we get to do some crazy stuff. I'm going to Merchant Scroll for a Mystical Tutor. I'm going to Mystical Tutor. I'm going to plus Teferi up and Mind Twist my opponent's hand away. I also have food here that I think my opponent would like more than their Hanger Backwalker, so I go ahead and help them out by making that trade. Attack with Golos and pass for the turn with an untapped Strip Mine and a couple other lands untapped. I go ahead and Strip Mine the land that they untap as usual. Opponent has exactly 1 card in hand, 1 land in play, and some food. I'm going to tuck their food. I'm going to replay Strip Mine, Snapcaster, and Mind Twist away the last card in their hand because I like that, because it makes me happy. And then I was going to Jace and exile their deck, most likely. The goal was going to be to exile all cards from their library and have them have no cards in hand and just a graveyard full of stuff. Of course, to do that, I would have needed a discard outlet like Dak Fade and Narset, but I'm sure I could have got there with a little bit of work. All right, so we run into game 2 with Paul DeRoche. Or maybe I would have just gone for the kill because, that's like playing with your food. And there's a limit. It was cute in the beginning, but maybe that would have been too much. Anyway, playing Riss this time, and I've got a very nice hand once again. Any hand that goes and gets a workshop is good. Now, opponent plays an Exotic Orchard, so I play a fetch, and I'm not going to fetch, of course. And opponent runs out an Elvish Mystic, or at least I'm not going to fetch right away, so they can't use the land. And then at the end of their turn, I fetch and use it to vamp. And this time I go get a Soul Ring because a Mana Crypt would not have been... Oh, I'm sorry. A Mana Crypt wouldn't have been enough mana for me to be able to play the Crypt, play the Shackles, and take their guys. So instead I run this play. And I leave Soul Ring and an Expedition map untapped because I really want to map. And it's a good thing I do because my opponent abrupts decays a Soul Ring off a Vampiric Tutor there, and I go ahead and fetch a Workshop in response, and my opponent runs out of Survival. So this is definitely this is good stuff happening over there, but I do get to play Golos here. And my opponent's down to 2 cards in hand, so not super awesome. And I go ahead and get Ancient Tomb. This way, if they want to go Survival into a way to kill Golos, I can immediately replay him and get more land. Instead, opponent plays Riss the Exiled, which is pretty innocuous at this point, and a good target for Velkin Shackles. So I draw, fortunately finding a white mana to go with this Tithe in my hand, which is pretty cool. So I'll go ahead and get out a Tundra, run down the Velkin Shackles, attempt to steal the Mystic, and my opponent doesn't have any black, so he can't sacrifice it in response. Demonic Tutor for, of course, Chromatic Ori, because seriously, this card is ridiculous. And I'll leave Tithe mana up and pass. Opponent plays Deathrite Shaman rather than using Survival. I think that's pretty reasonable. It's a good card for sure, and it will keep me off a Strip Mine lock against them. Tutor up a Savannah with the Tithe, and draw a Sylvan Library, which is pretty cool. I get the Savannah because it's the only card I didn't naturally have in play, even though I have the Elvish Mystic. And I go ahead and replay Ori here. I can't... And then with 7 mana, I'm able to actually activate Golos. Of course, I haven't played a land yet, so I go ahead and do that pre-combat. And it reveals Mox Diamond, so I'm really glad that I held the land. Counterspell, which I can only play if my opponent attempts to do something before the turn ends, and a Factor Fiction. So we'll go ahead and play the Mox Diamond. That's 100% going to happen. And I Factor Fiction. And remember, I haven't played a land yet, so I actually throw away the Watery Grave, despite having the Shackles, because I'd like to play my land untapped and then cast Sylvan Library. Or if I get like some kind of 2-mana counter or whatever, I want to do something with that. So I factor Fiction to C, and I end up with this split here, I believe is what he makes, and I'm going to take the Force of Will, Ponder, or Mystic Sanctuary pile if that's the ultimate split. I think he rethinks it and decides not wisely not to put the Force of Will with the blue card, but I'm way ahead on board, so I am going to, and my opponent's low on resources, so I am going to take the Force of Will and throw away Teferi, Ponder, Mystic Sanctuary. That's fine. I've got Force of Will and a blue card. I can even play Plowshares or Sylvan. I decide that the play is going to be actually Plowshares. And I get rid of Deathrite Shaman before I can go active. Opponent plays land and passes. And can't really swing in. I've got Shackles still going, and I draw Urza, which is really nice here. So I can go ahead and play Urza, giving me a mana off of the guy and a mana from Golos, essentially only costing me 2 mana. That's worth it. And I'm going to rock the Ori once more, and I get Tezzeret, Command Tower, Brainstorm. Tezzeret is just so sick when you get the Ori going. All right, so I'm going to Brainstorm and put back a few cards. I don't need Sylvan Library at this point. I play a Tower. Tezzeret untaps, and remember, I don't need Sylvan Library at this point, but more importantly, Sylvan Library is a permanent, and I just put it on top of the library. So I go ahead and activate, and just like that, Sylvan, Fabricate, and Spellseeker. So I get to Spellseeker a counterspell into my hand, and then Fabricate into a Gilded Lotus, which I can then cast. And yeah, this commander is sick. Don't forget, though, that I also had Urza, Construct, Golos. So shields weren't actually down despite the way that it looked. Opponent runs out of Mana Crypt. Of course, I'm not going to counter that. Plays a land, and yeah, gives up. Makes sense. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So I had 30 points of attacking damage. I didn't have lethal next turn exactly, but yeah, I had lethal. All right, so that's it for game 2. And finally, game 3 against Paul DeRoche. And I don't remember what my hand was, but I remember it was pretty cool, yeah. Gosh, it's so good. Like, Mana Vault is just so good with this commander. All right, playing against Risk one more, and I don't know who's first. Okay, my opponent's first. First turn, Foul Orchard, and I get to go first turn land into Mana Vault. This time with a mana drain ready to go, possibly. Possibly soon. When it was Blooming Marsh into Arcane Signet into Symbiote. So a pretty solid elf turn, a little bit of acceleration, and I get Transmute Artifact and decide, you know what, I'm not even going to bother mana draining. I'm going to run out Golos and get Ancient Tomb, and then I'm going to use 1, 2, 3. So this is the play, by the way. This is the dream. First turn Vault, second turn Blue Source, Golos, fetch Ancient Tomb. Turn 3, you don't even need to hit a land. Just Transmute Artifact. If it resolves, then you sack Golos, you go get the 5-drop, and you pay the difference with the Ancient Tomb that you fetched. That's living the dream for this deck, and it happens with surprising and savage amount of regularity, actually. All right, so opponent then goes turn 3, kills my commander, so I am not going to get to do that because I didn't sit on the drain, and then plays a Heritage Druid. But I just thought I'd run through like how incredibly juicy that series of plays is. All right, so that's fine. I run out Spellseeker, and I go get a Demonic Tutor, I believe. Or Vampiric Tutor, rather. So this way I can get Golos into play without dropping shields next turn if I need to. Opponent does have a Cavern of Souls here, so it can make an uncounterable Risk, or Elvish Harbinger in this case, but is out of cards due to having mulliganed and puts a Reclamation Sage on top of their library, because that's how the Harbinger works. So since I know a Rec Sage is on top of their library and I don't want them to draw their top card, I Vampiric Tutor, change my plans, and go get Jace. I've got another blue source. It's going to hurt me. You know, I've taken a lot of self-inflicted damage here, but I can just tuck Rec Sage away. Now my opponent can pick up Harbinger with Symbiote and does correctly see that line. Then goes for the Crucible that he drew off the top. I can mana drain that, so I will. Can't mana drain the Harbinger. And then he could play the Harbinger and put Rec Sage on top of the library, but of course I would just chase it back again, and we could play that game all day long. It would keep me off from using Jace's 0, And so that's pretty good, actually, from my opponent to keep me off at the 0 play. But on the other hand, my opponent would be losing their turn over and over and over. And that's not good. So I don't know how I feel about it. I guess they wouldn't exactly be losing their turn, but yeah, anyway, it doesn't matter. With the 3 mana off the mana drain there, I get to Jace into pretty nasty stuff here. I'm going to go ahead and run out Transmute Artifact this time. I decided not to play Golos and mess with it. I just transmute the Mana Vault out of play, so I'm no longer taking any damage from it, and pay the difference and grab a Chromatic Ori with exactly 5 mana floating. Once I tap it, what will I do with that? Tap 5, 6, 7, and I will play Golos once more. And I use Golos to go get Strip Mine because I want to get the Cavern of Souls off the board, and my opponent's fairly constrained on mana. Opponent has an opportunity here to make a great top decked play, but it's not going to be the Rec Sage, because they didn't tutor last turn because they couldn't. Instead, my opponent plays Mystic and picks up their fetch land, or their Crucible rather, but doesn't have enough mana to play it. On my turn, I go ahead and Enlighten, tutor, Jace, and put permanents on top that I'd really like to have in play, because that's what you do when you have Golos running. And then I activate Golos, and I hit Duretti, Crucible, and then a Guardianship that I'm not going to be able to use, but that's just fine. I go ahead and Strip Mine their Cavern of Souls, and replay Strip Mine off the Crucible, and Strip Mine their Foul Orchard. I go ahead and play Sensei's Divining Top, reorder the top of my library. I have a Force of Will on top of a Swords to Plowshares now, and then I Duretti away their Eternal Witness, sacrificing my commander. So the reason I do this is, so I have Force of Will on top of my library, so I can still protect my board if they've got some kind of play that I really care about, like for example a Necropotence. But otherwise, if my opponent, by doing this, there's an incentive for my opponent to attack with both creatures at Duretti. And if they do that, so they can, do some chip damage on it. But if they do that, if I misplay and block like Heritage Druid with Spellspeaker, then they can just pick it up and they lose nothing. They just damage Dirty for good. But there's a Plowshares under that Force of Will, and so if they do make that play, I can actually block. I can plow this first and then block here and kill it, which I really wanted off the board because it's a mana source. So it's kind of a bait situation, or at least that's what I'm hoping. Of course, if they see what happens with the Plowshares, they can pick up in response. Well, we'll see what happens. So they play this creature here, so I don't have to worry about Necro now. So I do exactly that. I change the order of my deck, grab the Plowshares, excuse me. I hate the yawns. All right, and go to plow the Wirewood Symbiote. Opponent does see that I'm going to make the block, so he picks up the creature he's attacking with, and Duretti loses no tokens. Okay, I've got a Sensei's Divining Top, so I'm going to play the top, use the top so that I have Force of Will in my hand and a permanent in play, and then use Chromatic Ori. Well, I'm going to Jace first, and I'm going to put permanents back. And I'm going to use Golos and Shuffle. I think what I did here is actually because of what I drew. I actually was planning to use my commander, but I put 2 lands back and change up my play because I have Force of Will now with Narset, and Force of Will with Muddle the Mixture, and so I just change up what I'm going to do there, and Force of Will their Heritage Druid, and let them have their other creature. But all right, there's a Grim. I'm going to go and just bounce it, play a Grim Monolith, tap the Grim Monolith so that I can use my commander. I have to, of course, get my commander back into play. That's what it was. I didn't have the commander actually in play because I had sacked him to Duretti, so that was why I changed it up. So then I'm going to replay Grim Monolith here, then put the commander into play, then use the commander with the whole Jace nonsense thing, and yeah, that's it. Pretty crushing. Anyway, commander's super cool, and as I'm playing, I'm discovering more and more of these interactions that I really like. Of course, you can see there in that green match that Tabernacle would have been fantastic, right? Like super, super fantastic. If I could have fetched that out, just the ability to cause my opponent to actually have to tap, what was it, like 3 mana per turn, would have been tremendous. So I don't know that it's necessarily necessary, but I'm going to try it out and we'll see how it goes. Anyway, that's all I've got for the video though. Hopefully you enjoyed watching the gameplay. And as always, your suggestions and input are welcome. And as you'll see, I believe somebody had made the suggestion of Tabernacle. I want to remember who it was. I don't off the top of my head. However, as you'll see, the suggestions that you make do influence the cards when the suggestions are like sound. You know, when you make a suggestion, I'm like, yeah, that's good. I'm not too proud to make a better deck, right? That's what makes me actually proud, is having good decks. So any suggestions you've got, I welcome them. And other than that, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.